And my boss had said, do not bring your wife. The real issue is my priorities were wrong. And in that moment, my communication in every way was that you're not as important as my job.
Welcome to The Inspired Marriage. I'm Diane Hollenbeck.
And I'm Kevin Hollenbeck.
And we want to help successful couples be more satisfied in their marriages. Welcome.
Well, today we're going to talk about selfishness. We're going to talk about lack of attention to your partner. We're going to talk about priorities and a little bit about how to navigate completely different orientations. So I want to just start with a story, and it's just a little bit awkward here because it's my story, but within the first year of our marriage, so we got married in 1987 in November, and within probably 6 months, maybe a year, wouldn't have been any more than that, I had changed my career and we had moved to New Jersey from upstate New York, where we got married, and had that job. And I moved into sales, and I was at a trade show in New York City. And if you know anything about New York City, we were staying in Times Square at the Marriott Marquis, and I was working at a trade show at the Jacob Javits Convention Center, which it was my first, I think, trade show that I had certainly ever worked in that way. My boss, lovely man, Harvard MBA, very kind of strict disciplinarian. By the way, my background is one of military. I did serve in the Army as an officer for 3 years on active duty and another couple in the reserves. And so I'm used to following orders. I'm a firstborn, if you know from our previous episodes. And so, again, following the rules. And my boss had said, do not bring your wife. But I was a newlywed. I want to bring my wife. So I did. And she was in the hotel, and how's he ever going to know? So it's before the show begins. We're walking through the Marriott Marquis, and there's these elevators. And as we're coming near the elevator, I see my boss coming the other way. His name is Wayne. And I'm walking next to Diane. Diane's towards the elevators, and I see him. And in my single focus, I look at him, I greet him, and I do a hip check on Diane. I didn't mean to really do it very hard, but I kind of hip check her to get her out of sight because she would have been just out of the sight line. But she basically flew across the room, and I went on to greet my boss. I don't think he ever saw her, actually, and went on. And so then the trade show went. Diane, in the meantime, is maybe not crumpled. What did happen? Did you actually fall down? I don't think so.
No, I didn't. I just hit the wall, literally, in many levels.
Yeah. And so that evening, or whenever we got back to the room, let's just say a discussion ensued. And I think, obviously we had quite a disagreement in that moment, and Diane was incredulous. And of course, I was like, look, you weren't supposed to be here. What did you expect me to do? And of course, I didn't realize, first of all, how hard I had hit her. But here's the problem. It didn't have anything to do with that. My priorities were misaligned. And I was very much focused on career, believing that was what my job was. I prioritized that. Again, whether or not you should have come was not the issue. The problem was I had made that decision, and then in my attempts to hide it, I hip checked you. And
yeah. I want to call it a full body check, but it's okay. We remember things differently. I don't know if anyone else does. But what surprised me was I was caught off guard, right? And I was completely, incredulous is a good word, but stunned. What the heck? Just all because my value was in question. What do you, Wayne, you know what I mean? Wayne's more important than it was just, and I think you said earlier today when we were talking about this funny story that you didn't realize how selfish that was in the moment, right?
Yeah, I just, again, in military, follow my instructions. We could look at all the different types of behavioral styles. I'm very directed, get the job done. And so to me, in that moment, my decision was, my actions indicated what my priorities were, that my job was more important than you. That is, in fact, how it manifested itself. And in that moment, that was actually my heart. So I think it's important to recognize that in these moments, which I didn't anticipate, you didn't anticipate, we're lovely. We're in New York together in this beautiful, hotel overlooking Times Square. Everything's great one moment, and the next second, you're caught off guard, to say the least, as I body check you into the wall and ignore you completely, right?
Yes.
As I go on. I didn't know I'd hurt you. I had, to some degree. I mean, it's the most preposterous, ridiculous thing. But I think in every marriage, there's those moments where something gets revealed like that. And it is one of priorities. It's one of hurt when we hurt our partner. It's one of really being thoughtless in a lot of ways, and it's been something that I'm still ashamed of or feel badly about. It was not right of me. It never was. I've apologized. We've talked through this, but still, that's why it's a little embarrassing to share it, because it's so ridiculous, and I've never laid a hand on you before or since. It's just that this happened right in that moment, and it was a very physical thing, and so. How do you deal with this? And when you've communicated and done something really stupid, as I did, that isn't just. Of course, I started with, well, I didn't. I started with justification.
You started with what choice did I have?
Yeah, what choice did I have?
What choice did I have? You weren't supposed to be here.
Right. So that
that's digging the hole deeper.
All the way, dug the hole deeper, and then it was the classic. Well, I didn't hit you that hard, and again, but I did, right?
Yeah.
And again, it hit.
Yeah.
It was just this. It was a hip check,
yeah.
and you lost your balance. Really, what happened, because you weren't anticipated just walking, and if I hip check you and I walking right now, or you did to me, we'd lose our balance. But it was all. So again, I didn't intend to. But it was all defense mechanism. When the real issue is my priorities were wrong. I was focused more on my work than you, and that happened so early in our marriage. And again, we talked about it, and I don't remember exactly how all the conversation went. That was 35 years ago now, but 36 years old, whatever. But it was helpful for me to really, first of all, ask your forgiveness, to realize I was wrong. And later on, when we made some other decisions in our marriage, and you've challenged me on several occasions, we'll share some of the other stories down the line, I knew that I had to prioritize you over work. And even in that moment, the right thing would have been to not do that, to probably walk up to Wayne with you there, because that's what would have happened had I not done the old hip thing. And I don't know what would have happened, but maybe I would have been fired on the spot. I don't think so. But for you to have known that you were first no matter what would have been the right thing. And in that moment, my communication in every way was that you're not as important as my job.
And we find these times in our marriage when we're not even aware of how selfish we are. Like really what the impact of what we did, our actions. Like your intent wasn't to make me feel less than, and you didn't hurt me. Like, let's be really clear. There's no physical, I wasn't not safe. I just literally got kind of, tossed against the wall, not physically, but just by the motion of the hip check. But what I want to be clear about is intent and impact. So Kevin didn't intend to hurt me emotionally or have me, hit up against the wall or make me feel less than, but that was the impact, right? And what I experienced is so different than what you expected, right? Like you just expected to save face. Right. And so be really careful of that. When you're kind of saving face around others, with others, at the expense of your spouse, wow, you are in trouble now. Right. And so you want to add to that?
Well, we open each podcast talking about how we want couples that are successful to be satisfied in greater ways. And I think that in many couples that we see, including ourselves, one of us is more successful. And I do that in air quotes because successful by the world standards might be the person that makes the most money or whatever, which again has been at one level, the case in our marriage, right? I'm the successful one. What do? I earn money. I do these things. And I think so often that one partner, it feels like they're more important. And what I was communicating, and so in my mind, though, I want to tell you, I was like, I need to provide for us. I need to be successful in this so that we can, have a nice home or whatever and pay the bills and I can meet your needs, right? And so the intention, again, was that I'm going to be successful, but I think this is the root of a lot of couples' dissatisfaction. And so thankfully, this incident happened early in our marriage, within the first year. And it really made me look at, how I can misprioritize. Now, I still struggle with this from time to time. This isn't like it's a one-time incident at this level, but I still can find myself working and being distracted by those things instead of being focused on you and thinking about it. But it goes much deeper. And I think it is this idea that my work is more important than you. And I don't care whether that's you and a child rearing or whether that's me and work. That's not true. You are the most important person in my life, always, no matter what. It is not work. It is not even our own children. I understand there's times when they need us more, but your number one was not what I communicated, and I think has to be the basis of a strong marriage partnership.
Yeah, and I'm not innocent here. Like, I can over prioritize our children or other things, more than Kevin. But what's interesting about this incident is how unaware Kevin was. He just was like, off he went to dinner with his boss. And I went up to the hotel room like, what was that? Right? Because I experienced something so different than he intended. And his rationalization in the beginning left us unable to relate to one another. He just couldn't take on board that maybe you shouldn't check your wife in the hotel when you find your boss in front of you. Like, it just was like, but of course I had to do that. Like, don't you see, you weren't, so when I think it's an important tool to consider when you find yourself rationalizing, are you protecting your selfishness? Are you protecting yourself as like, I'm the priority here. I'm more important. And it goes back to that power inequity again, where Kevin's more important than I am. That you can't build a marriage on that. I mean, you might have a different role in the world than I do. I might have a different role in the world than you do, but we have to be on equal footing in these areas of respect and ability to relate, right? If it became, Kevin was more important, then that really starts to disintegrate our communication.
I've been very blessed by you in that you've been strong enough to call me out at times, several times during our marriage, rightly so, right? To say, some version of, hey, what was that about? You called me out, and I'm grateful that you did, and we talked it out, and you basically said that'll never happen again. Right. And so you had and have rights. And again, in my unthoughtful, selfish way, I did this stupid thing for which I needed to apologize for. I did apologize for. Yeah. But it is important that when these things happen to a couple, you deal with them in the moment. And I think the foundation of a partnership, a marriage early on, is when these conflicts happen, that we have to talk it out. And I'm wrong sometimes and you're wrong sometimes, but I would say I'm probably wrong more of the time in a lot of ways. And again, we have different bents, but I tend to have these things where I can just be completely blind and insensitive and unaware. And that persists at one level in our marriage because I am in fact unaware. I'm not wired to see things, and I'm not making that as an excuse, but I'm thankful that I have a partner who is aware. And when I hurt you physically, not at all, but emotionally,
Oh.
when I hurt you, neglect you,
Yeah.
when you feel unloved, when you feel uncared for, you have permission to call me out. And early in our marriage, you did that for me. And again, so I'm grateful, not that I hip checked you and not that I in any way hurt you, but I'm grateful that it was just so not my intent to hurt you. I was devastated when you told me how you felt, because I did go have dinner completely unaware that you would even be moderately upset. I was like, that was awesome. He didn't see you. That's literally how I walked back into the hotel room that night. When I came back up to the hotel room in that evening, again, I had gone out to dinner with my boss. He had not seen you. I was like, that was awesome. We got away with it. That I was like he had no idea. You're in the hotel room, like thinking completely different. And I was frankly devastated when you told me your version, which I was completely unaware of. So again, I hadn't intended to hurt you. I hadn't intended to ignore you. I just was trying to follow the rules of my boss so that I would keep my job and be able to be successful to provide for you. I mean, that's all my intention. But your version, and I was like, oh my gosh, this was like everything I had not intended. But when you explained it to me, of course, it was so egregious, thankfully, in one way, right? You weren't hurt in any way. But I was like, oh, I'm such an idiot, right? I mean, I just had to realize just how stupid everything was. And my actions demonstrated my actual priorities. That's the harder piece. Now, I think that took a lot longer than that day to work through. But over time, I think it was true. And as I reflect back, and we've reflected for years, I'm like, that was a point in our marriage where I realized my priorities were misaligned and that I had to put you first, and that would mean perhaps some consequence that might be bad for my career, but that was the right thing to do. But my instincts were to do the complete opposite. My instincts were to follow the rules. And so, it was devastating for me when I realized how much I had hurt you. And of course, I am so sorry that ever happened. But wow. And so I think we all are selfish, right? I think we all have our priorities, and we don't know that. Again, I think I'm doing the thing to help you. I think I'm providing. I'm like, wow, we got away with it. That was a close call, right? And it was, my narrative was so different than your reality. And when you told me, and again, you're strong, you communicated with me, you were heard. I don't remember all the details, but I do know that it was stunning. And of course, I apologized the moment I knew that had happened, but it's taken me a while to realize that was, and to some degree still is, my orientation. So again, some of this is like, I need to change that, but I get very focused. I don't necessarily notice the world around me. I'm not certainly tuned into the emotions of everybody else. I get the job done. So this is an area of continuous growth. I need to be humble and say that to the camera even and to the audience. Yeah. But it's not an excuse. It's really not. But I also know that you know that about me now, and you can come at it knowing that my heart and my desire is for you. But even in that case, I will hurt you and you will hurt me sometimes. And I think it's so important to maybe not have a big thing like that happen. That was just so obvious. Great story, right? But we do that in little ways, even every day. And so that's part of what I've learned from this thing.
Yeah. And one thing that's so important, if you're the person that was hip checked, body checked, hurt emotionally, right? Really, the important thing is when Kevin came in from dinner that night, of course, I was stewing, but I didn't start with, I can't believe you did that. And to go from hurt to accusation is a really pretty dangerous path. So what I said was, what was that all about? I took it off the other person. I took it off of Kevin. And I said, what was that? Can you just explain that to me? Because I do not know what just happened. And, he's walking away like in La La Land. And I'm left making up my own stories about how all of these different things. So again, this is so much about story. Kevin's story being in the military and following his boss's rules and all of these things. But story can hurt our partner, right? Like Kevin's story about have to follow the rules really hurt me emotionally, right? It didn't hurt me physically. We want to be clear. But my story can hurt him, right? And so when that happens, when the hurt happens, don't say, I can't believe you did that. Why did you do that to me? The question is, what was that? What just happened? Because that makes it a topic rather than an accusation and an attack. So it's super important to be open to forgiving, open to letting go. I didn't bring this story up. I was super surprised Kevin wanted to talk about this on a podcast. So welcome to the inside of our marriage.
Yeah, what's that about? So I think that's, and I'm glad you shared that, because again, how we communicate matters. And but you asked a question rather than made an accusation, and I think part of the reason you did that is because you love me. You actually wanted to understand me, right? You weren't trying to fix me, right? And of course, if I'm humble, which I think this is a lot about being humble and in the moment, right? Instead of walking in top of the world, we got the deal, whatever. Now it's like, oh, wow, that wasn't good. And when you asked me what was that about, I don't remember what my response was, but it can't be. Well, it probably was some defensive.
It was a complete rationalization.
But when I really think about the real answer to that, it really is, it goes back. And as you peel back the layers, which takes time, it really goes back to all of this kind of bias, how I see things, how I see you. I mean, it's so much deeper than what was happening in the moment. And allowing us to kind of work through that and talk it through. You now know me, right? But you still will say, or I'll say to you, what was that about? And that's just, I'm glad you articulated that way, Diane, because I think that is a way to enter into a conversation that can yield some healing and some resolution in time. And that's super. So yeah, that was not Kevin's best day.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this session that we just had together. And if you found it helpful, we'd love to interact with you more. So certainly like and follow us and click on the link below where you can sign up for our upcoming newsletter and maybe even engage us in a community we're going to be building soon where you can share your stories, learn from others who also want to improve their marriages.